Okay, yeah, we can start. So basically, we're going to be talking about third-party monitoring. I'll call it TPM for short, third-party monitoring, TPM. So in the presentation, I'll be referring to it as TPM. So we're going to talk about what third-party monitoring is, the advantages and disadvantages of using TPM, what context can TPM be applied. We also look at the application of TPM in the past, the present, and the future, because there's an involvement in, like now we see there's COVID-19. Can we still be able to do TPM? These are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And at the end of this webinar, I'm hoping that people will have an improved understanding of TPM and its applicability in different contexts, like in fragile situations, emergency situations, development situations, how it can be applied. So we'll start. What is third-party monitoring? Third-party monitoring describes the practice of contracting third parties to collect and verify monitoring data. This is other than the organization which is doing an implementation of a project, or an organization which is actually funding a project. So, for example, you can have maybe USAID or the World Bank. They have projects that they have in various contexts. In this context, I'll give examples from a fragile context. So we are looking at countries like South Sudan, we are looking at countries like Afghanistan, we are looking at countries like Yemen, Syria, etc. So why is third-party monitoring applied? These are some of the things that we're going to be discussing in this. So in fragile context, development and humanitarian partners primarily use TPM to monitor the activities of partner organizations in places where their own staff faces access to restrictions. I know there are many people who've worked in a fragile context whereby it could be a war-torn country. It could be a country whereby staff members are not able to go to a particular district or to a particular province or to a particular place, but they might actually be having projects going on in that country. That's where TPM can also be applied. I can just give you an example. In South Sudan, you can actually have donor organizations, for example, the World Bank. The staff members might not be allowed to leave the capital city. So what do they need to do? They can actually use third-party monitoring. And they've actually done third-party monitoring for some of their projects, whereby they use the TPM to be the eyes and ears of their monitoring teams to go to the field to verify projects or to collect monitoring data. And also to mention that third-party monitoring can also be employed in stable environments as well. It's not just mainly in the fragile context, but also in development context. It can also be applied. For example, there are quite a lot of companies that can be used. I'll also give an example of the USAID. They've different contracting arrangements with companies like Social Impact Management Systems International, BDCI, Creative Associates, even NGOs as well, where they can actually be having maybe like 5-year long contracts to do third-party monitoring and also evaluation as well. So some organizations, when they're contracted, they go beyond the monitoring bit, and they also do the evaluation aspect and also run evaluations for the donor. So this is what USAID does in some countries in fragile context or in development context. Wow, I just put a slide of some of the areas that I've been to when I was doing third-party monitoring. This one was for a World Bank project in South Sudan. So in terms of remoteness, it could be like this cannot be accessible because of the environment, or maybe because of conflict, or because of war, or because of the infrastructure that is there. As you can see on the picture, on the left picture, you can see that area, it can only be accessed by air, and when you go to that place, you can actually have trouble even moving from place to place as well. And also the infrastructure might not really be very friendly as well. Why TPM? The next question is why employ TPM? So third-party monitoring enables UN agencies, donors, to keep an information flow to communities while meeting basic requirements of its own accountability and resource framework and those of its donors or stakeholders. So for example, an organization really wants information. They want to report back to their constituencies, especially if they're donor funds. There are people who are involved, taxpayers' money, and at the end, they might want to find out if their money is being put to good use. And a project might be in a humanitarian setup. There's still need for people to know what happened with the money that was invested in country A, or what happened to the funds which were set aside. Then TPM also serves to verify whether projects were implemented and whether they were in line with basic planning indicators. So I'll just give you an example of the project that I was doing TPM for. The World Bank contracted the UN agent to do the TPM on their behalf, and it was an infrastructure project where they were putting boreholes, they were sinking boreholes, they were setting up community teams in place to do the planning and the running of the boreholes and the watch infrastructure. So the TPM that I did, it involved going to the community, and some of these places were actually very remote and like conflict areas. So what we were doing was just to see, okay, if they had reported that there were 20 boreholes, are there really 20 boreholes? And also to see the status of the infrastructure in place. If it is a borehole in place A, is it there? Is it offering a service? Is it working? It was part of the TPM that I did, and TPM can also be used to do that, to verify what partners might actually be reporting that they've actually set aside or they've actually put in place. TPM can provide opportunities for gathering data from no-go areas where direct access to the field is not possible for agencies on staff. So for those who have actually worked with the UN or who are working in the UN, you can actually understand that sometimes to go to the field, you actually need clearance from the UNDSS, the United Nations Department of Security Services, to say, look, can you go to this place? They would actually tell you that you can't travel to this place because there's fighting, or you can't travel to this place because maybe there's a natural hazard which is there. So TPM can actually enable a third-party monitor or a third-party agent to send its staff there, where the donor agent or a particular organization staff members can go there, and they can still be able to collect the required data for monitoring. And TPM is also used by donors in an increasing number of countries as one of several components of elaborate and independent monitoring mechanisms. So TPM could also be applied whereby an organization is doing an implementation and they're still collecting their own data, but TPM can also be used by the donor to collect their own independent information, that which they could use to verify information from the partner who is on the ground. Sometimes TPM is used to do validation of partners reporting where confidence is lacking. Sometimes some organizations, they might actually misinform, or when in their reports, they can actually say, okay, we drilled 20 boreholes, or we drilled 100 boreholes, or we dug this and that, or we put infrastructure in a place, where in actual fact, they might actually not have done that. So TPM can actually be used to verify that and to see if the organization is reporting correctly. TPM organizations are often able to access field locations on a more regular and frequent basis than aid organizations due to more flexible security arrangements. Like what I've said earlier on, the UN, they have their own security systems. Different NGOs, they also have their own various systems. And they, in fragile states, like for example, in South Sudan, where I'm based, every organization or development partner or NGOs, they have their security departments, and they actually compile security information on particular places. And if they deem the place to be very volatile in terms of security in that particular time, their staff members are actually not allowed to go to the field for monitoring activities. So TPM organizations are flexible. These are some of the things that donors or organizations which are hiring TPM agents look for. They say, for example, an organization should be able to go to places like A, B, C, D to do the monitoring or to collect data. And they have their own security arrangements which are independent or which are not governed by the organization which would have employed the TPM agent. Then TPM also helps with monitoring compliance with environmental and social standards, including GBV issues and grievance redress, identifying course corrections early on in project implementation. So that's another function of TPM as well in terms of monitoring compliance. Like, for example, the World Bank, they also expect their TPM agents to report on GBV related issues as well. After having said the reasons why TPM should be, or the functions of TPM, there are also risks as well for TPM. So if you're using a TPM agent, there are different disadvantages that I'll just take you through. Like, for example, quality of reporting from the TPM agent might be poor. You know, the organizations might actually have their own standards, or they could say that we meet this particular standard by an organization which is hiring them to do TPM, but they might have their own internal structures which might actually limit the quality of the data to be collected, the quality of the monitoring data to be collected in the field. Then TPM agencies can detrimentally affect the reputation and acceptance of commissioning agencies and their partners. For example, we could look at the issues of sexual exploitation and abuse. Yes, on paper, they're required to do that, but we could also find out that they might actually have weaker systems. And when they send their field monitors to the field, they might not be able to adhere to some of these PACA-related issues. And this could actually be detrimental to the donor as well. And TPM could also be costly as well. So, for example, if an organization is giving funds to an implementing partner, they also put a certain percentage, or a certain percentage is allowed from that budget to carry out monitoring and evaluation activities. But you can also find out that on top of that, if an organization decides to hire a TPM agent, this is an extra cost as well. So this could also increase costs in terms of the implementation. Then there could be potential conflict of interest, especially when using local monitors. So, for example, if these are places that are not easy to access or easy to go to because of conflict or because of the infrastructure or poor road networks, the best thing to do is to work with field local monitors from that particular area. Yes, a company might be an international company, or might be a company which is based in the city, for example, but for the actual monitoring data collection, what organizations do, what TPM agencies do, they make use of local monitors. So you can actually find out that there might actually be conflict of interest if a local monitor is from a particular place and is going to see, maybe, for example, it's a wash facility, wash project, and they are monitoring the construction of toilets and they're going off and off and off. They might actually end up creating rapport with the people on the ground or the implementing partner staff members. And this might actually introduce bias into the way that they might actually do some reports. Or the field monitors or the local monitors might actually be beneficiaries as well. So their judgment might actually be biased. And this can actually give some negative implementation. I mean, negative result on the quality of the data or the whole process as well. Then there's difficult potential conflict again when bringing monitors from other areas or countries. This is another problem, like what I've said earlier on, that you could actually work with local field monitors, but then because of expertise, you can actually find this in fragile states. Maybe there's a problem with capacity, and you might need to bring people from place A to place D. And there might actually be some fights with the local people, like, why are you bringing these people? They're not from here, or they're from another tribe, or they're from another religion, or they're from another country. So these are some of the issues that could actually be experienced in the course of carrying out TPM activities. Then difficulties accessing certain areas if you're not implementing agents. Here, what do I mean? Sometimes it is much better to work with people. If you're from, for example, a donor organization, an implementing partner is working in a certain place, you know, because the people are going to the field every day, they actually end up having relationships with people or with the beneficiaries or with the local leaders from that particular place. But the problem is, if it is an independent TPM company that is getting into a place a place where they were not doing the actual implementation, or where they are not doing the actual implementation, they might actually face challenges. So creating rapport with people. Most people might not understand. They might say, we know that this project is being carried out by organization A or this partner or this donor in the coming years. So there might also be need to make sure that they really understand that the TPM agent is working hand in hand with the implementing partner or with the particular donor. But that is another challenge that can also be faced as well. Then TPM weakens institutional memory as well. This is another challenge that happens. For example, in my experience for that project that I did TPM, we're doing the TPM on behalf of the agents, right? What was happening is, for us, we're knowing what was happening in the field. If someone was to ask me, or to ask the team members, what was happening, how are people, viewing the project or this and that, we actually direct experience compared to the donor agent. So sometimes the donor agent just had to rely on us, like in terms of security, what were the risks? In terms of acceptance of the project, what was it like? They actually do not have the first-hand information or first-hand experience on the way the project will be being implemented or being viewed by the people as well. And TPM weakens accountability systems as well for the donor agent or for the implementing partner if it is being done by the implementing partner, by the TPM agent. What do I mean by this? So, for example, you go to the field and people, they actually have maybe issues or misgivings about the project. And they could most probably report to the TPM agents, or they might actually be asking for questions like, how come this is happening, or are we going to continue to enjoy the project even if after you pull out the benefit of the project? TPM agents might actually not have the first-hand information on where the project is going, but their purpose is just to go and collect data. So in terms of feedback mechanisms, yes, there might be feedback mechanisms in place, but TPM doesn't really assist in strengthening the TPM, the accountability system that might be in place. Enter COVID-19 pandemic. How does this affect third-party monitoring? Because as you can see, the reason why some organizations make use of third-party monitors is because they cannot actually go into the field themselves because of various reasons, because of security or because of accessibility, and they have to hire third-party monitors. So what happens with hiring a TPM agent? Basically, just a matter of transferring the risk from the organization or from the implementing partner or from the donor to the TPM agent. And this might actually have what can I say, ethical connotations to it. But anyway, we'll talk about that. So the present and future of TPM in the face of COVID-19. With COVID-19, a lot has been happening. People have been getting infected from all across the globe. And there's a risk of the pandemic spreading to many places, and different governments, both in fragile states or in stable countries, they've had some travel restrictions that they've had to place on their citizens or other foreigners getting into their countries or leaving their countries to try to arrest the spread of the COVID-19 virus. So there are health-related risks which come with COVID-19, and this also do not spare people or beneficiaries or staff members from the donor agencies or from the TP agencies. So there are health-related risk. There's risk of exposure to infection and spreading of disease of TPM agents, staff members. There's a risk of spreading COVID-19 to counterparts, partner organizations, in decentralized offices, vulnerable populations and beneficiary communities during monitoring activities. And one of the principles of carrying out humanitarian work or development work is the no harm approach. So sometimes you can actually find out that people from the organization, different organizations, whether the donor organizations or the implementing partners, they might actually be, putting people at risk, or the people that they're meant to be saving, or they're also being put at risk as well by the persons of interest. So there are quite some issues which are related to that. So how do you proceed from here in the face of thinking that TPM is a solution for organizations to go to places that they cannot go to. So there's a risk transference. How much risk can TPM agencies take? So TPM agencies, some of them, most of them, they're actually profit-making organizations. But how much risk can they be able to take, or are they willing to take, or is a donor agent or an implementing partner is prepared to expose TPM agencies to, even in the face of conflict, or even during a volatile situation, or maybe in the face of natural hazard. And then there's risk to beneficiaries during the monitoring exercises. There's need to avoid harm. So with lockdowns and travel restrictions, TPM is even more difficult as well. So just try to, my next slides will be looking at the possible solutions. What could be done to arrest this. Considerations for the future. So like what's been happening, people have been working from home. For others, it's becoming like a new norm. So working remotely as well could also be a solution, or could also be used to try to deal with the issue of travel restrictions in the face of COVID. So TPM can actually be conducted remotely. But then this depends. If the risk is in terms of health are high, those in terms of quality are manageable, and the criticality is high, sometimes TPM has to be done. Monitoring has to be done, whether there is a hazard, be it a natural hazard or a man-made hazard. Like in this case, it's a man-made hazard, it's a natural hazard, the COVID-19. But for some of the projects, they are very critical, and the program criticality is high, and they still need to monitor. Like for example, food distributions, for example, to monitor to see if the efforts to try to keep down the COVID-19 pandemic are working, or everything is in place. They still need to, to continue monitoring these various projects. So what can be done? Maybe there could be need to conduct focus groups with people in various locations, using platforms such as Zoom, like what we are doing here, Skype, WebEx, BlueJeans, or WhatsApp platforms. But then we're also going to look at the disadvantages of using these some of these platforms. How practical? Is it practical to use some of these? Yes, they could actually be applicable in various situations, looking at the various levels of the stakeholders, of the beneficiaries, and their access to these different platforms. Then for face-to-face, this could involve meeting beneficiaries and make sure that they observe social distances and good hygiene practices. So if the TPM involves going into the communities, and if you are working with local food monitors who are already in those local areas, who might not have challenges in moving from place A to place B, and if they can still be able to hold focus group discussion. This only applies to countries, or maybe to contexts where there is no total lockdown, where people are not even allowed to move. But for countries where people are still able to move, or communities where people are still able to be mobile, face-to-face meetings could still take place, but just to make sure that social distance is being maintained and people wash their hands. If there are focus group discussions, there could actually be a compromise whereby instead of having 10 people in a group, you could most probably have 3 people in a group who are not sitting close to each other, but maintaining safe social distance. Then it might also make sense to make use of local monitors already based in those communities. I've already alluded to this. Then if the situation is so maybe the place is an epicenter, a TPM organization in consultation with the hiring agent or implementing partner, they could choose to postpone the TPM for a later stage where it's safe to do so. Then there are also other solutions that could be used, smart solutions that can also be applied. Like for example, geotagging. Geotagging could apply. Maybe there are small projects, like mainly infrastructure-based projects. This involves tracking the status or completion of small community projects, infrastructure projects, or assets, and being able to plot against a map to see, okay, this infrastructure is here, there's a bore here, there's a bore there. So, for example, the project that I was talking about, the infrastructure project, which involved wash facilities, toilets, bores, and what have you. We're taking coordinates of the particular infrastructure. So, and come up with an ID. If it was a bore, we actually had an ID for your bore, geo coordinates for that bore, which would actually be used to plot that on a map. That could still work as well. Then there could be an application of remote sensing and drone usages. Here it involves monitoring the existence of large physical assets and activities that can be seen from satellites or drones to see if there's action around that. If it's a bore, if it's a hospital facility, to see if people are still able to go to that facility, are they going to that facility, or maybe their services which are being offered. And it is also good to track smaller physical assets moving through delivery systems to a final destination. This can be done using remote sensing and drones as well. Remote sensing can also be used to monitor the state of target goods and structures through sensors over time. Then there's blockchains. So blockchains, they can be used to validate the delivery of physical and non-physical assets at each stage to the end user. I'm so sure people who have experience in procurement and experience in managing pipelines, they can actually have a better understanding of what I'm trying to talk about. This involves streamlining procurement activities through smart contracts, and also to create an indelible record of transactions or audit trail in terms of things, or like, for example, in the face of COVID-19, we've been trying to procure, or maybe donors are trying to procure testing kits, or they're trying to procure medicine. They can actually be able to do the monitoring using the blockchains. Like, okay, this was procured from maybe China or from this particular country. It moved from China to this particular country. From there, it got to the country Zimbabwe. From Zimbabwe, it went to the particular place where the equipment or the resources are required. Then there's also the opportunity to use social media platforms. We have different platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter. But like what I also said earlier on, these things are not applicable to all the contexts. You can also find out that in most of the contexts, especially in the fragile context, people might actually not have access to this. But this is just to complement some of the monitoring techniques that could actually be applied in the face of COVID-19, or in the face of restricted movements. So for social media, it is good to understand citizen sentiments, e.g. experience, opinions towards projects, monitoring red flags for fraud, corruption, and unequal treatment of communities, or pinpointing specific concerns or red flags for fraud. So you can actually see that, for example, right now there's Twitter, and TPM agent, they also have Twitter handles where they can actually be, seeing statements from different people. People could actually be complaining that we don't have testing kits in this particular place, or we don't have A, B, C, D, or maybe things are not getting to the intended beneficiaries, or people are starving. So, data can be collected through feedback from social media. Then there's social media big data. This involves understanding citizen sentiments. I've touched this a little bit earlier. Then monitoring red flags for fraud, understanding community trends in aggregate, providing ability to spot individual concerns and location with extra effort in data mining. So social media can also be utilized as well. Or maybe someone can collect information from WhatsApp groups. I remember Chenjerai did a presentation last week on the use cases, and he also touched a little bit on that as well. Then the flip side to these solutions that I've mentioned, then there's the issue of availability and capacity to use drones. So for example, when a TPM agent gets a contract, maybe they not put a budget to get drones, or they might not have access to acquiring the drones, or even if they might have the access, they might not have the capacity or to have the personnel to be able to operate the drones to collect the information. Then there's also the issue of connectivity and technical infrastructure. Sometimes people might not have the access to internet, especially in the fragile context, whereby interviews can be done remotely via Skype or via Zoom. So these are some of the things that, some of the problems that can also be faced as well. Then there's insufficient financial resources. There might not be resources, you know, to get maybe more extra people, or to get more extra field monitors in the field, or to provide them with the necessary equipment to use to carry out their TPM activities. Then there are also issues like, can development, okay, this is a question that I would ask, can development work be done without getting in touch with the beneficiaries? You know, sometimes, you know, there might be need to be actually getting into the field and they have the face-to-face meeting to the beneficiary to get their views. So it might be difficult to do that by trying to apply remote working modalities. Then there's implications for psychosocial support health projects. For example, it might also be difficult to monitor, not just to monitor, but also to implement some of these activities in the face of natural hazards like COVID-19. So these are some of the flip side to the suggested solutions. Oh, wow, okay. Basically, that's what I have, especially from my India. So we could open this up for your reactions, for your comments, or for your contributions.
Thank you very much, Roy. That was wonderful and very detailed. We've set up that people can unmute themselves, but may I ask that people put up their hands so that we manage the discussion in an orderly manner. But thank you very much, Roy. And there are two questions, if I can start with the questions that were posted on chat. One was, the first one was, I'll read it as it is. It says, curious to understand if TPM has a place and can be applied in cases where there's mistrust, especially between government and civil society. That's one question. The other one,
sorry, I missed that question. Can you come again?
Yes, it says, curious to understand if TPM has a place and can be applied in cases where there is mistrust, especially between government and civil society. I think basically that where there's mistrust between civil society and government, would TPM work? Is it applicable? I think that's what the question is trying to get it. If I can read the second question so that you answer both of them, because they are two. It says, considering some of the risks mentioned, can you say a bit more on the issues of liability around TPM? Is there insurance, for instance, and is this sufficient? What other safeguards are there for evaluators? So maybe if you can just tackle those two questions. I don't see any other chats, and then after that we can open it up for those who want to vocalize their questions.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I'll start by addressing the question on the curiosity to understand if TPM is a place and can be applied in cases where there is mistrust between government and civil society. Wow, that's interesting. I think at the end of the day, yes, it can be applied, but it involves working with all the stakeholders, including the government. So if it's a donor is hiring a TPM agent to work in a particular place, they also need to involve the government. They also need to involve the local communities and let them know the reason why they're getting a TPM agent to work in the place. Because third-party monitoring is not involving like witch hunt. What they're trying to basically do is just to, you know, to verify if the projects, the projects have been implemented according to plan, or if the project, I mean, if the beneficiaries themselves, I mean, for some time, the government is also a key stakeholder, and they might also benefit greatly from the third-party monitor. So, for example, the project that I was doing, the TPM one, it also involved working with the government, and the government departments understood the importance of the TPM and what we're doing, and they're also forthcoming. So we also collected data from the government as well. So it depends with the particular project and the approach that would have been taken to engage the government. Let me look for the other question.
It was
the next question
again. Would you like
okay.
again?
Okay, I have it in front of me now. It's okay.
All right.
When the next one was considering some of the risks you mentioned, can you say a bit more on the issues of liability around TPM? Is the insurance, for instance, and this sufficient? What other safeguards are there for evaluator? Okay, thank you, Patrick, for that question. So there's actually, I mean, there've been some debates on how ethical it is to work with TPM agencies in the face of conflict. For example, in Somalia, there was that issue which was being, I mean, there was a debate which went on like if you're using a third-party monitor, I mean, third-party monitoring company, what you're basically doing is you're transferring the risk from your organization to a different organization, and how ethical is it? So what happens is these third-party monitors, you know, when they are bidding for this work, they are told about the dangers. They know about the dangers, and it is a risk that they are willing to take. And I'm so sure it also depends on their policies in terms of insurance to ensure their staff members. I'm also sure, but I think this lies on the better lies on the TPM partner to make sure that their staff members they have security and they have insurance that they insure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Roy. We can open it up for questions. Participants, you can unmute your mic. Please put up your hand. I pick your hand and then unmute your mic and you can ask questions. And thank you very much once again, Roy. That was very informative. So
thank you, Cynthia.
Yes, Brighton, you can go ahead.
Is Brighton speaking? Is Brighton speaking? I can't hear anything.
Brighton, you can unmute and speak.
Maybe unmute me.
Hi, Brighton, you can speak. Okay, I don't know what's happening. I'm unmuting everyone, but Brighton's mic is not unmuting. If you can hear me, Brighton, maybe you have to chat.
Hello, Roy. If I may ask, this is Charles speaking. I just wanted to say that I appreciate your presentation, and just wanted to ask you to kind of give some examples of how local NGOs can also do TPM, because I think a lot of the examples you used were much more at a higher level in terms of donor or country level. How can it be applied at a local level?
Okay, thank you, Charles, for your comment. If I understood you very well, you said you'd like to understand how local NGOs can also carry out TPM. Okay, I'll ask the question so that I can understand you much more. Are you saying that how they can be TPM agencies or how they can employ TPM agents, but TPM companies?
Yes, to a certain extent. And in this case, because they are local NGOs, it's probably just assigning an outside consultant to do the kind of work that a TPM agency could do.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. So I haven't really come across where I've had to work or where we had to work or where I was working for an organization which was working with local NGOs, but it's possible. I've heard about that it's possible that because these donors when they want TPM agent, they can just make a call, ask for organizations to express their interest, and if they meet the requirement, they can also be employed. Then you can also have situations whereby maybe international TPM agencies, international TPM agencies can subcontract to some of the local or locally based organizations and work with them. So I think it all goes down to the issue of like, do they have the capacity to carry out TPM agents if they apply and get a contract to do TPM agents? But I think it's possible. Both some international NGOs can also be used for third-party monitoring. I was reading somewhere recently whereby there could actually be like a peer review. I mean, like NGOs doing TPM on each other. Like for example, it's just an example. NGO A could be used to monitor the activities of NGO B, vice versa. So I think it's possible, but at the end of the day, it depends on the capacity of the NGO. Thank you.
Taku, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
Carry on, Taku, you had your hand up.
Oh, okay. What I can say, like I say, chase both sides.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Sorry, I didn't hear that question or the contribution.
Yeah, Taku had put his hand up. Taku, you can speak.
Okay, thanks, Roy, for the presentation, and thank you, Chair. I think the purpose of monitoring conceptually is actually to collect data on certain predetermined indicators. Like we want to collect data on the number of masks that are being distributed in Djibouti and so on. But now when you look at your presentation, there are some other things that can be used to monitor, which are used by third-party monitoring, as you call it, like the use of drones and so on. And then for me, then it becomes a fallacy to use such kind of technology to collect monitoring data, given that it doesn't really capture information that we really wanna use when it comes to making decisions or even improving a program. For instance, you would find out that the number of masks that are being distributed are not enough, or the age group that is being given the mask is not the actual age group that has been predetermined in the program planning. So maybe just explain to me how you would actually do that. Then the second one is about the role of context, because I understand in monitoring and even in evaluation, context plays a bigger part. And now when you outsource a third-party monitor who is just coming into the program at the 11th hour, and they have not been part of the process of understanding the problem and conceptualizing the program in terms of theories of change, in terms of the design of the program. Now they come and monitor in the 11th hour. They do not know the context to which the program is put across. So how then do you try to tease out some of the challenges that might come as a result of third-party monitoring? Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Tao. So basically, like what I said earlier on, that some of the technologies, some of the modalities that could actually be used, they actually have limitations. Like what you rightfully said, like the use of drones, how can you use drones to monitor the distribution of masks? So like what I said earlier on, some of these it's just a matter of trying to deal with the situation, like to deal with the restrictions. But some of the some of the solutions might not be applicable. Like what I rightfully said, that people might not have the drones or the capacity to operate the drones, or the staff members who can actually be able to operate the drones, or even to have internet access, or to have access to internet in the field. So in this case, just to respond to your question, particularly focusing on some of these like responses for health like distribution of masks. What could actually be done is to make use of the statistics, you know, from the health facilities if they're distributing masks, if they are, you know, distributing hand sanitizers or, you know, vaccines, you know, just to go through their registers if they can be able to share their registers. This could actually be another way of dealing with the problem. But the solutions might not really necessarily be sufficient, or might not be enough to be able to, you know, to say we are still continuing to do third-party monitoring in the face of travel restrictions, or in the face of restrictions as a result of maybe conflict. Then your second question, that's a good question again. It's something that you experience, like if an organization is just coming from Norway to do third-party monitoring, and when they were not involved in the inception phase or in the implementation, sometimes you can even see that you might have to do monitoring retrospectively. I'm speaking from experience. There's a project that we had to do monitoring retrospectively after the project. I mean, the project implementation was almost coming to an end, and we were asked to do the third-party monitoring when the project was almost coming to an end. So there were actually some changes. And what can be done to deal with that situation is to most probably do a comprehensive desk review, you know, to start the theories of changes, look at the baseline, to look at the project documents, to try to, you know, to understand what the project is all about before getting into a community to say, we are here to do third-party monitoring on behalf of this organization. Thank you. I don't know if I've answered you. Over to you, Cynthia.
All right, thank you. I hope, Taku, you are adequately answered. If not, please, you can put up your hand again for additional information. But there's a chat, Roy, if I can read it, from Dube. Does TPM not add an extra parallel in data collection? Who guarantees that their work, the party doing TPM, meets set standards? Does it not engender more of policing and fault finding than the ethos of monitoring, learning by seeing? It's a loaded question, but I hope you got it. But it's under chat.
Yes. I've actually seen it in the chat. Thank you so much. Dube, for this contribution. Wow, does TPM not add an extra parallel in data collection? Yes, you could say so. So one of the reasons why TPM is done is sometimes to, you know, verify data which could actually have been collected, you know. So, but one thing that I can also say is TPM cannot substitute monitoring by the actual implementing partner. So, for example, we can actually have 5 NGOs which are actually implementing a project by donor X. You know, they still have to do their own monitoring and submit data to the donors in that. So sometimes the donor is the one which is actually hiring a third-party monitoring company or a firm which is managing the monitoring and evaluation aspect of the project. So what it does is just to simply, you know, verify the information, or to assist with TPM, or to assist with the evaluations. That's why I said earlier on is that it could actually be costly, because when the organizations are doing the actual implementation, they take a budget from the project fund to do monitoring, and the donor is also paying another TPM company to do third-party monitoring for them as well. Yes, you could say it's extra parallel in data collection, but at the same time, it also assists with data verification, or verification of you know, the outcomes and outputs to see if what the implementing partner is reporting is actually the same thing that a TPM agent is actually finding on the ground. The issue of who guarantees that their work meets certain set standards. So when a donor has a TPM agent, they have their terms of reference. You know, they have standards for data collection. You know, they have their expectations. They expect an organization to come up with very good tools. You know, so sometimes TPM agents, when they come up with data collection tools for the TPM, they share with the donor agent. I mean, the donor, and the donor can actually review and to make sure that all the monitoring information is going to be, you know, is going to be covered under the tools which are going to be used. So the responsibility also lies with the hiring organization to make sure that the TPM company follows standards, you know, if it's an issue of prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, to make sure that they have policies. So sometimes a donor can actually ask a TPM agent to provide that proof that they have structures in place, you know, to make sure that they've trained their staff members on PSEA, or they've trained their staff members on fraud. They've been asked to sign, you know, confidentiality issues, you know, all these sort of things. So it also lies with the hiring organization to make sure that the TPM agents meet these set standards. And your other question, I think your last question says, does it not engender more of policing and fault finding than the ethos of monitoring, learning by seeing? So at the end of the day, it depends on how the TPM agent is working and what type of a relationship that they actually have with the partner organizations and with the people on the ground, the beneficiaries. You know, I think earlier on there was a question like, how can TPM be applied when working with governments and what have you? So it's a matter of taking a participatory approach to make sure that all the stakeholders of a project fully understand the importance or understand the reason why TPM is being done. You know, for example, if beneficiaries in fragile place know that the donor cannot come here because of conflict, they will still understand, and they understand the need to give feedback. But this can only happen if the community or the beneficiaries have been engaged and understand the importance of monitoring. Monitoring is to make sure that the project is going on according to plan, and it's not like witch hunt or fault finding. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for that, Dube, for the question. Shylock, you had your hand up. You can go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think mine will borderline a question and a contribution and also thinking ahead. So the context that Roy is describing, I'm quite familiar with it. And maybe let me put it in my own words. So normally, third-party monitoring is considered independent. Let's say donor X funds NGOs A, B, C, and D, and these are required to do their traditional monitoring. And this donor then happens to be very interested in asking a very specific question using an independent lens. So what the donor would do is they will hire a fifth entity, which becomes the TPM agency, to then go into the same landscape, collect data, monitor, test theory, and so on. And in our case, we're doing that on a governance project, I think for several reasons, political and so on, where we then went in and assessed the specific hypothesis around the intervention that was being done by the very many different organizations. And I like that Roy raised that it's not as simple, third-party monitoring is not as simple as it appears, because the whole question of independence disappears, because when you get there, you need to be introduced to the same structures as the ones that your NGOs are working with. So the independence disappears. And then there's a lot of compromise that has to go on in there. I think we've heard of American firms who had to pay, I think somewhere in the Middle East, had to pay some of these Taliban and so on to make sure that they're able to do their work. It brings a lot of challenges, and I'm glad you've given us insights into this. And I think the next observation for me is you touched on very interesting things, which is the need for us to start thinking outside the box. But I think in thinking outside the box, I want to challenge ourselves and say, okay, imagine you've been implementing a project. January, maybe your project was supposed to end in June, and all of a sudden we've got COVID-19, you cannot go out. And then within the discipline itself, like as Dr. Chirawa was saying, is context matters and so on. But we still have to proceed without evidence. We still have to proceed without making contact with people and so on, which I think makes the section that Roy presents very exciting on thinking outside the box. Yeah, we've relied so much on our tools, the face-to-face interviews, embedding ourselves in context. But I think this situation is quite challenging, and it wants us to think outside the box. So I might be interested in seeing, Roy, how some of the use cases around the use of drone technology. I know it directly applies, for example, if you're going to do crop assessment, you can deploy drones to get high resolution images for you, and then you can do your fancy analysis. I think Kenji showed us the world of analysis is sort of it's endless. It's just your imagination. And then I think if we look at Patrick's question, Patrick raises a lot of very key issues, I think, where we're then saying is third-party monitoring a way of putting away risk and make your work done by the poor in the field? Because what we understand is TPM has been a game for the big guys. It's very difficult for local firms to get these contracts because the standards are set so high and so on. But when it is really hard, that's when you get small firms being subcontracted almost as fourth. Then they're no longer third. I think they are fourth or fifth parts to get a smaller share of the budget. I think it's a very interesting discussion, Roy, that you've opened. And I just wanted to get my thoughts and my perspective to it, and not necessarily a specific question to post.
Thank you, Shylock, for that. Feedback from Dube to you, Roy. She says, well, for the comprehensive answer. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, make it 8 minutes past 12. We had said this series would be up to 12 o'clock. So I seek your indulgence to carry on. Those who need to leave, you might want to say you need to leave. I seek your indulgence on carrying on. If everyone's okay with carrying on, we can carry on maybe for another 10 minutes. And I can take just 2 questions so that we don't spill over too much over time. So if I can take 2 burning questions and then give Roy a chance to round off his presentation.
I see Colette is speaking, but I can't hear what he's saying.
I think it was just background. They've muted themselves.
Okay, that's all right.
I'm looking at comments. Patrick is thanking everyone for joining. Thanks, Roy, for presentation. Interesting indeed. Thanks to Zia for organizing such important discussions. Those are the comments. So I don't see a hand now. Can we safely close this meeting? Shylock, do you have any closing remarks, or should we give it to Roy first and then you close?
I'll give it to Roy first and then I'll close.
All right, over to you, Roy.
Okay, thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating and for your contribution. So yeah, TPM is quite an interesting area, and for your organization, it's something that you could also try to use. And also not to mention that in this case of COVID-19, you can actually find out that some agencies or some organizations are actually looking for third-party monitors as well to go to the field for them when they are not able to go to the field. So it's actually a very good field. And also so that you understand that TPM doesn't really substitute actual or on direct monitoring as well. So as much as you might actually have TPM agencies on the sidelines, it's also good to do your own monitoring as well. And it might also be costly as well. These are some of the things that organizations might want to consider, the costs which are involved, having to hire another company to do TPM for them, on top of their own monitoring and evaluation that they might also be doing. But in terms of giving balanced views or balanced information, TPM could also be another way to go. Yeah, basically that's what I can say. And if you want to understand more about TPM, I'm so sure you can find a lot of things on the internet. And if you also want to find out about organizations which are offering TPM, there are quite a lot of firms, and you know, something that you can also find off the net. Thank you so much once more, everyone, for joining and for indulging us. Thank you so much. Over to you, Cynthia, and Shiloh.
Thank you, Roy. This was amazing. And to everyone, please, if you have more questions beyond this session, feel free to contact us at ZIA through our secretariat. I know sometimes people might take time to digest information and then have questions after the series, but feel free to keep communicating with us. I'd like to invite you to the next series, which is next Friday. Please check our website, check our emails for those who are members. For those who are not members, please, it's a good opportunity to sign up as members. There are lots of benefits for being a member to ZIA. Our website elaborates on the benefits. And once again, I'd like to thank every one of you, but hand over to the President for closing remarks. Over to you, Shiloh.
Thanks, VP. Maybe let me take the indulgence to read out the next title. I see Dr. Shirawi is exited. But our next webinar is on the systems of evidence and use of monitoring and evaluation in parliamentary systems. And this is a webinar series that's supported by UNICEF, EAA, we're based in South Africa, and the Zimbabwe Evaluation Association. So I invite you 9:30 to 12:30 next week. And we expect a diverse audience. We're expecting our Office of President and Cabinet to join, and also Secretariat. And if we'd like some of the members of Parliament to also join, because this is a session specifically designed for them. I think in short, we're really excited by the support and the attention these webinars are getting. Our Secretariat, Victoria, will share the links for this video. The one for last week was posted. For those that have not seen it, please email our Secretariat. They'll send you the link, but it's been posted on YouTube. So the same video will be edited, and it will also be posted on our YouTube site. I think with the season COVID-19, stay safe. Always keep washing your hands, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar series. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you, everyone. I'm ending the meeting now. Have a safe day.